What if I told you that your entire life was an escape room? And most people will die before they actually realize that they were supposed to be solving it. So when you think about it that way, you're actually in a room right now. You're in a specific room with specific circumstances, playing a specific character. And the way out isn't what you think. The key is actually not even finding the door. The key is understanding why you're in the room in the first place. So stay with me, guys. Stay with me because this changes everything. I want you to think about the last time that you're in an actual escape room. You walk in, you're given a scenario, usually. Maybe you're like a detective or something, solving a murder, or maybe you're a spy that's having to defuse a bomb, find and defuse the bomb. I don't know, some random structure. They give you props, they give you clues, they give you puzzles to solve. And the whole point is to figure out how to put all the pieces together and connect all the dots so that you can get out. Now, imagine that your life works exactly the same way, but with one crucial difference. Let's say that before you entered this room, that you planned it. Okay. You chose the character that you'd play. And that included your personality, your strengths, your struggles, your fears. You selected the family that you were going to be born into and their belief systems that they had. You chose the props, the setting, the circumstances that you would come up against, your relationships, the people that you interacted with. Like you placed every clue, every trigger, every pattern, because you know exactly what was the lesson that you were coming here to learn. Right? So you set it up perfectly. And then what happens is you walk through the door, and the moment you entered, you were hit with this spray that went over you and completely wiped your memory. Completely wiped it. You forgot that you planned it. You forgot why you chose the character that you chose. And you forgot what it is that you came here to learn. So now you're standing in the middle of a room that you designed, surrounded by these clues that you planted for yourself, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And the goal isn't to escape the circumstances. The goal is to remember, to piece it all back together, to recognize all those breadcrumbs that you left for yourself before you forgot. And a lot of people never realize this is actually what's happening. They think that life is happening like to them. It's a bunch of random circumstances. It's a bunch of bad luck. It's other people's fault. So they spend their entire lives trying to change the room instead of understanding why they're in it in the first place. You can just imagine this person that's in a room and they're pulling on every handle, they're pushing every button, they're trying to get out. But the door doesn't open because they haven't figured out what it is they came there to learn. And here's what changes everything. The moment that you realize that you planned this, that every difficult thing that you're facing is a clue that you left yourself, suddenly nothing is random anymore. Every pattern, every struggle, every single person that triggers you, it's all pointing towards the lesson that you came here to remember, what it was you came to learn. So the question has to be asked, how do you figure out what your room is teaching you? Like anything, you start looking at the clues. And let's go through the three main ones. One, the patterns. Patterns. Now ask yourself, what keeps showing up in your life? Like, do you keep attracting the same type of relationships? Do you keep finding yourself in the same conflicts at work? Do you keep hitting that same wall every time you try and move forward? Because they're not coincidences, they're clues. Each clue is showing you where the lesson is. The second main clue is your character. Now, asking yourself, why was I born into this family, this community, this religion, that each have their own unique belief systems? Why do I have these particular fears? Why do I have these particular strengths? If your life is an escape room, your character isn't random. It's got to be specifically designed for that room, for that lesson. Like, so I don't know, let me think. If you're someone that, let's say you're someone that struggles with boundaries, right? If you're someone that has a problem saying no to people, then that's the point, right? You're here to learn that lesson. That is the lesson. You might be someone who's terrified of being alone, goes from relationship to relationship. And that lesson isn't about someone finding to complete you. The lesson is probably more about, how do you feel whole on your own? The third important clue are your triggers. Things like what makes you react, what sends you into this space of anxiety and anger and shame and fear and all those emotions that we experience. And most people try to avoid their triggers. They think if they can stay away from the things that upset them, they'll be fine. But your triggers aren't the problem. They're golden. They're golden because they're signposts. They're keys that help you and point you in the right direction towards what it is that you're here to learn. And the part that a lot of people miss is that the circumstances aren't the lesson. Circumstances are the classroom. The lesson is what you're supposed to learn about yourself when you face those different circumstances. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you're in a relationship that keeps falling into the same dynamic. It keeps looping around. Same shit every day. Da 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 da. Right? You're the one that gives, gives, gives. Your partner is the take, take, take. And you end up in this space of feeling resentful, you feel exhausted. Some people would think that the lesson is, well, don't date those type of people, have some more self-respect. So they might leave and find someone new. And 6 months later, they're right back in the same pattern. Why? Why? Because that's not the lesson. The lesson is about you. And in this case, it's probably, asking yourself, why do you give everything? Now, what are you trying to prove? What part of you believes that your worth is tied to how much that you sacrifice? And that becomes the real question. And once you answer it, you see that the pattern is something that's been reoccurring, usually a lot of the time through your life. And once you see it, you're in a position to shift it. And usually what happens in that situation is you don't attract the takers anymore. You start attracting different people because the room changes because you've learnt that lesson. So, how do you actually solve your escape room? You stop trying to change the circumstances of the room and you start asking yourself better questions. It's as simple as that. Instead of asking yourself, how do I get into this situation? Ask yourself something like, what am I supposed to be learning here? You know, instead of asking yourself, how do I fix this person? Or how do I change this person? Start asking yourself something like, what is this person showing me about myself? What pattern is it that I'm playing out? Or what belief is it that I'm acting from? And maybe instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask yourself, why is this happening for me? Or what part of me is creating this? What am I avoiding? What am I not willing to see? And guys, this is where it gets uncomfortable because the answer is always about you. It's always about you. And, I'm not trying to put out blame in any way. Please never take it like that, right? This is about power. This is about self-empowerment. Because I tell you why. If the pattern is coming from you, it means that you have the power to change it. But a lot of people don't want to look that closely. They'd rather sort of stay in that room, complain about the situation, complain about the props they've been given, rather than admit that they had a hand in how it was designed. And I get it, right? Before you start sending me hate mail, I get it. I've survived some shitty experiences in my life. I've gone through DV. I've gone through some really horrible, traumatic crap. I get it. I get it. And for a long time, you know, I wasn't ready to, I wasn't ready to see things this way either. I wasn't. I was still processing my trauma. But eventually I had to ask myself, if I design this room and if I chose these experiences to learn something, then what was I supposed to learn from it? And that shift changed everything for me. But here's the but. It only worked when I'm ready. So if you're going through trauma, don't try and analyze it. Don't try and process it. Allow yourself just to be through it, right? Feel what you need to feel. This is not the work we do while we're going through this. This is what we do when we've come out the other side. And you know what? We go in these loops over and over again. We all do it. I've done it myself, and I've also worked with people who've spent literally decades solving the wrong puzzle. They're trying to fix their circumstances. They're trying to change other people. They're trying to escape their feelings. And none of it works because they're not asking the right question. And that question is not, how do I make it stop? The question is, what is it teaching me? What is it teaching me? And when you finally ask that question honestly, when you really look at what that room is showing about yourself, everything starts to shift. Everything starts to shift. You start to see the pattern really clearly in this space, and you can start to recognize why you've been stuck, why you keep doing the same things over and over again. And then you start to recognize the lesson of why you've come here. What did you need to learn? So here's what most people don't get. This room, this life, it's not forever. You're here to learn something specific. Once you learn it, you graduate and you get to go home. Back to your soul essence. Back to where you came from before you entered the room and forgot everything. And a lot of people never figure that out. They spend their entire lives reacting, repeating patterns, trying to escape circumstances. And then they get to this point in their life where it's the end of their life and they die without ever understanding what they were here to learn. They never solve the room. They just run out of time. So, guys, if you're feeling stuck right now, if you're seeing a pattern that you can't seem to break or a situation that feels impossible, stop trying to escape it and start asking, what is it teaching you? Look at the patterns, look at your character, look at all your triggers, and ask yourself, what did I come here to learn? And I can tell you now the answer won't always be comfortable. Sometimes the lesson is that you've been, giving your power away. Sometimes you've been running from something that you have to face. And a lot of the time, for a lot of people, it's been that you've been living from a belief, some patterning or conditioning that was never, it was never yours to begin with. Just something that you took on. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you really understand what your room is teaching you, you can finally start living from that awareness. You stop looping and repeating in those same cycles, and you stop being controlled by these patterns that you didn't even know that you had. You start living as the person that you are, not this character that you've been playing. And when you finally learn what you came here to learn, when you solve this puzzle that you designed for yourself before you forgot, the door opens, you graduate, you go home. go home. And that's the game. That is the game. That's what we're all doing here. You know, we are spiritual beings having that human experience. And this entire life is one room designed to teach you something specific about yourself, something that you came here to learn. The question is, are you going to figure that out while you're still here? You're going to have to come back and do it again. So stop looking for this door and start understanding the room, because that's the only way out. So if this resonated, guys, stick around. I've got more of this stuff, and I love talking about things that most people aren't interested in. If you're in that space too, come join me. Okay.